The Dallas Cowboys preseason will be absolutely huge for an overlooked roster battle that we got thinking about because of Mike McCarthy's comments on Tuesday. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get to it. Here we go. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with you in between Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with quick-hitting videos such as this one. A lot is going on the Cowboys world. Obviously, last practice before their joint practice against the LA Rams, because they play a preseason game on Sunday. And Mike McCarthy talked about Mike McCarthy has daily pressers with reporters, which is, one of those Cowboys things that they like to do. I won't complain about it because it gives us stuff to talk about during this not dead period, but also not regular season period yet. And he usually will provide like injury updates. Sometimes these are short pressers, but sometimes there is a very good question from a reporter. I mean, multiple. We've got good reporters covering Cowboys for sure. But there was one question that stood out, unsurprisingly, from Mr. Patrick No-C Walker about special teams. And I think Mike's answer was very important. He was asked about the kickoff rule, which maybe by now you were tired of hearing about. Maybe by now you're like, I know there's a new kickoff rule. However, it might define a roster spot on the Cowboys' 53-man roster. It might be as important as we think it is, or even more. And here's why, right? So Mike McCarthy was asked about this by Patrick Walker. He said, hey, there is this opportunity to have two returners. It seems like everyone wants to go that way, which Mike McCarthy seemingly confirmed. He did say, it seems like everyone in the NFL is going to go with two returners under this new rule. And McCarthy was like, we have conversations about this every day. The actual reply was, as we sit here right now, the question is who is on the 48-man roster, right? That's a very real conversation we've had and will continue to have. But I thought it was a very important question from Patrick No-C Walker because McCarthy basically confirmed that they were going to do what seemingly every NFL team is doing right now, which is putting two returners back there in the returning zone. Now, for those of you who don't remember, you can have either one returner out there in that zone while every other blocker is, downfield 5 yards apart from the kicking team's, tacklers. And that's because they want to reduce the impact. So they don't want players to gain speed and hit each other on the middle of the field because that's when injuries and concussions happen. This way, it's more of an offensive line blocking a defensive line type contact where there's 5 yards in between these guys. So some teams might be like, I want the extra blocker down there. But I think because the blocks are over there happening over there, all the way down there, you probably want to cover more portions of the field with the two returners, and then you can have a lead blocker also paving the way. As Patrick No Walker points out on his tweet here, he says, new NFL kickoff rules reward teams for having two good returners because one ideally will also be a good blocker for when he has to, right? So let's say that the Cowboys run Kevontae Turpin, and I'm going to make up something, right? Just so we don't get to the candidates yet, because we're going to get into some candidates that I think could earn a roster spot because of this, and some other candidates that could be alongside Kevontae Turpin, which was Patrick's question, by the way. He asked, who would it be beside Kevontae Turpin? If they're not kicking it Kevontae's way, then Turpin will likely serve as some sort of lead blocker for whoever does return the football, right? Which could be a central part of the equation when you're trying to return kicks. Anyways, I started thinking about this, and I was like, okay, so the natural answer at first would have been Deuce Vaughn. But we've talked a lot about Deuce here on Primetime, and we've talked about it's looking difficult for him right now to make the 53-man roster. Still not practicing, by the way. He did not practice on Tuesday. We'll see if he'll get some work in, maybe in the joint practice versus the Rams, We'll see if he's ready for the preseason game, which I think could be massive for him because that's when he could shine the most with his shifty playmaking style. I think it will benefit him when the plays are being run to the point where you gotta go to the ground for the play to be over instead of having a whistle save you and maybe blurry the lines between what is a tackle and what isn't a tackle. I think that would benefit Deuce Vaughn. But I started thinking about, okay, so Deuce is injured, and it's looking like Deuce has a tough path to the 53-man roster, which we have talked about in other videos, by the way, which you can check out in the channel. We've talked about Royce Freeman's rise, who is now also dealing with an injury, so maybe that and will end up helping Deuce a little bit. But Royce Freeman has been said to be a potential special teamer, a very good player in pass pro who already understands what McCarthy is trying to do with the team. So it seems to me like right now the Cowboys likely group of 4 at running back would be Zeke, Rico Dowdle, Hunter Lipke as fullback, and then Royce Freeman as that 4th running back who might be a healthy scratch on game days or who might end up being active for special team reasons while you find your inactives elsewhere across the roster. But anyways, who could be beside Kevontae Turpin as Patrick Walker lays out here? I think that's an important question that could define a roster spot. As I said, here are some names, though, that come to mind. And I'm going to start with the big one because, boy, oh boy, this fits perfectly into what has been going on in the last couple of practices. And I think this whole conversation benefits one player specifically. Based on what reporters have let us know, based on those who have had their feet in the ground, their boots on the ground over there at Oxnard, California, some of the players, and I remember Nick Harris tweeting about this, and this might have been changing day after day, and maybe we don't have all the information, but early on, Nick Harris had a tweet, Nick Harris from DallasCowboys.com, by the way, he had a tweet saying, Rico Dowdle, Jalen Cropper are also out there joining Kevontae Turpin in kick return duties. Deuce Vaughn was also involved. Now, Jalen Cropper is a big name here because Jalen Cropper, for those of you who maybe have not been paying attention to training camp practices on a daily basis, he is on the rise right now. So at first, the conversation was all about Tolbert against Dylan Brooks. And those two have delivered, I think, on their side of things, right? They're making plays. They're looking good. Tolbert is clearly earning Dak Prescott's trust. And then Tyron Billy Johnson starts turning heads in practice, and he's like, hey, I'm somebody in this conversation, right? I might not be a second-year player. I might not be a rookie, but I'm going to make my case heard to get into the 53-man roster. Well, over the last couple of practices, Cropper is beating several defensive backs out there on the field. Like, we've seen him beat Nashawn Wright. We've seen him beat starter Jordan Lewis. We've seen him get lost in coverage after running in motion pre-snap. He is making plays, and he is running some crisp routes based on the video that we've seen out there from reporters. I'm excited about Jalen Cropper to the point where I think he might make things difficult for the coaching staff. You've got 6 wide receiver spots, which all this time have seemed to have been etched in stone because the way that I've broken it down is you've got your 3 starters, Lamb, Cooks, Tolbert. Then you've got Jalen Brooks, who is clearly somebody that the Cowboys like, and they're not going to cut. Kevontae Turpin as a returner. And then, sure, you've got this open 6th roster spot. My logic since April has been that is going to belong to the Cowboys' draft pick because they picked somebody with a 6th-round pick, and that was Ryan Flournoy. Now, could they maybe stash him on IR? Could they outright cut him? Cannot rule anything out. If Jalen Cropper is playing this way and Tyron Billy Johnson is playing this way, they're making this a battle when it seemed like there was not going to be any room for an actual battle. That's how I've interpreted things since Ryan Flournoy was drafted back in April. But Cropper can have a very significant tiebreaker if he ends up being a solid kick returner who can line up out there with Kevontae Turpin. Let me tell you this about Cropper, man, because I was curious. Naturally, the first thing that I did when I was putting together this show So let me look up some 40-yard dashes. Cropper is in the 86th percentile, running a 4.4. Now, Ryan Flournoy, though, also has a 4.44. That puts him in the 75th percentile according to Mock Draftable. So just based on that, and let me tell you something extra, Jalen Brooks, 4.69, 5th percentile in terms of a 40-yard dash. Now, speed isn't the only thing involved with being a good kick returner, but if you're not that fast, it's a tough battle, right? Like, I don't imagine Jalen Brooks is going to get a lot of kick return opportunities just based on his speed. And I like Jalen Brooks, and he's making some noise as well with the receiving. So he's going to make it. I think he's going to make the roster. I think that's pretty clear by now. But as a kick returner, I don't think he will make coaches fall in love. So if Flournoy and Cropper are already battling kind of for that same roster spot, how they perform as kick returners might be a very important battle because these might end up defining a roster spot. Now, it's also a battle that involves Rico Dowdle, though. And it's tricky because you would think you don't want your number one running back, assuming that Rico Dowdle ends up winning that battle against Ezekiel Elliott. But let's assume for a second that Rico is a top guy of that committee. Do you want that guy running out in kick return? Because I think for a lot of years, the answer would have been heck no. This is not a lot of years, though. This is 2024 when there's a new rule in place designed to reduce injuries in kick returns. So now I'm kind of thinking, could you have your top running back out there? And it's a question that will matter for a lot of teams in the sense that, hey, could the Dolphins get Tyreek Hill returning kicks? Now, that would be crazy because Tyreek Hill is Tyreek freaking Hill. I wouldn't be a fan of the Cowboys running CeeDee Lamb out there, but I would understand it because they're dangerous with the ball in their hands. So this is one that is making me very curious, and I think ultimately this will be defined in the preseason more than in practice because I don't think the teams really want to run full contact kickoffs at practice. I think they want to avoid that as much as possible. But you're already going to play a football game in the preseason, 3 of them. So that is going to be one of the biggest shows of the preseason for the Cowboys at least, because these might define who makes it, who doesn't make it at spots like wide receiver. And I mentioned Rico Dowdle because if suddenly he ends up being the guy that is going to be running out there beside Kevontae Turpin, then Flournoy and Cropper are just battling as receivers. They're not doing it as returners anymore. Now, this is expected to be a rule that majorly changes the whole kickoff game. So kickoffs are going to matter in 2024 more than usual. I'm just excited about this battle. Let me know in the comments if you think this is a big deal, if you think I'm exaggerating, and maybe you think, hey, Mo, it's not that big of a deal. And who would you like returning kicks out there beside Kevontae Turpin? Let me know in the comments. Looking forward to reading what you have to say. Ladies and gentlemen, that will be it for me tonight. Enjoy your Tuesday, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye. Hit the like button for me. Bye-bye.